when I woke up, very confused. She said, "You almost died last night. In fact, no one can believe you were alive."
I went into the games not knowing what was coming.
As humans, we just hate uncertainty.
You just sensed that it was out there.
You have to start somewhere.
We're all programmed to push ourselves even farther.
This is On the X, an IRONCLAD original. Welcome to On the X. My guest today is Dr. Belisa Vranich, a clinical psychologist and one of the world's foremost authorities on breathing science and its impact on human performance. She's the founder of the Breathing Class, creator of the Breathing IQ, and the author of 2 game-changing books, Breathe and Breathing for Warriors. Dr. Vranich has trained Navy SEALs, firefighters, pro athletes, and trauma survivors, helping them transform how they breathe to build resilience, boost recovery, sharpen focus, and even heal. Her work blends science, psychology, and performance in a way that's practical, powerful, and often life-changing. We're talking about something so simple. We do it 20,000 times a day, yet most of us do it incorrectly. This conversation is about how to fix that. So here we go with Dr. Belisa Vranich on the X. So you're a psychologist by trade, right?
Yes, exactly.
And so why breathing? What brought you into breathing?
Well, as a psychologist, I was always looking for things I could give my patients to do in between sessions, because that whole concept of like 45 minutes, which is a therapeutic hour, and then do nothing in between until your next session and be in therapy forever didn't resonate with me. I like sort of getting to the point, fixing the problem, getting out of therapy and living your life. So I was always looking for more things I could give my patients to do in between sessions. And granted, this was about 15 years ago. So breath work, most people didn't even know what breath work was. And the breath work that was available was very woo-woo, for lack of a better word. Not that I don't like some woo-woo, but it was very woo-woo. So I looked into it for my patients who wanted to relax, be able to relax. But then it morphed into something very, very different, which is sort of where I am now. But that's where it started.
Where did you, to your point, 15 years ago, I don't think I'd ever heard of breathwork. I'm trying to think of, we were talking as before you came on here, of when it came into the picture for us. And for me, it's somewhere probably between Wim Hof and James Nestor's book, Breath.
Yeah.
Right. Between those two things, I think is where it sort of came into the picture for me. But that's probably within the last 5 years, maybe a little bit further, maybe a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
But so where did you find it at that time? Because I don't think there was, those things didn't exist. Where'd you go look?
Out in Arizona, California. But, I was super hesitant because it sounded silly. And I understand the idea of learning how to breathe sounds silly. And I went to a breathwork class, and we started by holding hands, which is fine. But then you had to dance, which I wasn't fine with. And I don't know what my spirit animal is. And, the language for me didn't resonate with me. I'm very practical. I like baselines. I like numbers. And it was tough, but it was powerful. So it really piqued my interest. And I looked at breathwork and I found like, wow, you've got all this like woo-woo stuff, which is awesome. And then you've got, like, if you try to find more information on it, you have very technical. So intubation, emphysema, end of life stuff. So what about the middle? What about, us that just want to make sure we have better breathing because of the respiratory viruses and things that are not going to be going away? Or how do you actually measure? And I'm a big proponent of being able to measure things. You can't change it if you're not measuring it. And just because you say you're taking a deep breath and you're doing this like very dramatic inhale, like, are you taking a deep breath? Like, what is your lung capacity? So you have to remember that I come from, as a clinical psychologist, I come from a psychometric background. So I do IQ testing, court testing, personality testing, neuropsych testing. So when I started looking at breath work, that's my framework, is like, what's your baseline? So so that's where I came in and sort of wanted to fill a niche for being able to figure out, am I breathing? Am I really taking a deep breath? And if I'm not, what do I have to do to make it better?
Now, was there some exercise out of that, out of the woo, hey, we're hands in a circle dancing or whatever?
Yeah.
Was there something out of that where you saw an immediate difference, like you incorporated it into your life or into your patient's life, where it was like, wow, that's really making a difference, and in a measurable way, to your point?
Yes. Well, I have to tell you, the controlled hyperventilation trance breath-led meditation that Wim Hof made popular is something that's been done for a long time in holotropic breathing, and it's been done for a long time. It's sort of been repackaged. So we did that as well. And that was really powerful, although it was massively confusing because I couldn't get a lot of information on why catharsis happens, or why people giggle or cry, or why you feel better afterwards. So that part was interesting, and I wanted to find it and be able to quantify it, to be able to bring it back to New York City, where I was at the time, because you can't just tell New Yorkers that spirit is flowing through you. It's just not going to work. They need to know, why, how, and etc.
And that stuff too, not to cut you off, but it's not really functional breathing, at least in my estimation, right? Holotropic breathing kind of has a specific purpose, to your point. It's almost like a spiritual journey that you do. And it's kind of like, it should be, I think, in sort of a controlled environment, especially if you're going to go really hard and deep on that. But that's not how you breathe all the time. That's not functional in any way, right? So I mean, at least I'm assuming at some point you kind of said, okay, this might have a particular function, but we have to look at sort of baseline healthy breathing and how we might get that back into our lives. Yeah.
You are so spot on. I'm so grateful that you're going in this direction, because, whenever I meet someone, they're like, well, how should I breathe when I blah, blah, blah? Like when I strike, when I fight, when I'm upset, when I'm anxious. And what I bring to the table is that let's look at your breathing right now and how you're breathing all day long, every day. So the assessment I have is called the breathing IQ. And it's a functional assessment, a lot like something you would do at a physical therapy office to see if you have good rotation or, shoulder mobility. But the breathing IQ actually gives you that to see, is every breath I'm taking functionally, mechanically, an optimal breath? So you're so on target. That's where I was going with it, is let's look at the human body and see how is this being done and is it right? Because if we have any chance to mess things up, we will. And modern life will corrupt it.
Yes. That's well said. Yeah, as humans, I think that's 100% true. If we have a chance to screw something up, we will do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, this is something that this is a topic that I'm pretty familiar with, like on my own personal journey. I've done a lot of breath work, a lot of different practices, tried a lot of things, figured out what's worked for me, sort of developed some of my own stuff too. So I'm very interested in it. I think it's super effective. So let's start with kind of that baseline of how do you assess if somebody what does functional versus dysfunctional breathing? You talk about vertical versus horizontal breathing. Exactly. Like, what does that look like for people?
So I look at the mechanics. So I look at it, I'm been at the gym and I do CrossFit, and I look at it.
Me too.
Yeah.
You're in good
company. I'm not a CrossFit, yeah. Yeah. So, and I love the Fraser interview you did. That was great.
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah. I've known Matt a while, actually. He and I go back a little bit. So, but it was good to catch up. It was great to have that kind of in-depth conversation with him. Yeah. So,
it was nice. You really got to see his personality. And I was on single blades when I was 3, by the way. So.
Wait, say that again?
I was on single blades, ice skates, when I was 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So when you started talking,
were you a hockey player?
I was born in Wisconsin. I was born in Madison, Wisconsin. So, there wasn't much to do other than, skate or be in skates or be in the snow. I mean, you know how it was. So,
okay.
So,
cool.
The blades.
Cool. All right. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. So dysfunctional versus functional breathing.
So look at a squat, for instance. Okay. Is that before you start loading the bar, right? You should probably just take the bar and squat and make sure that your form is good. You should spend a lot of time making sure that your form is good on any movement, a deadlift, a squat, any of those. And then you can load the bar, because then you don't get hurt because your form is good. So with breathing we're looking at, is your form good? Are your mechanics right? So are you breathing from the most optimal part of your body using the right muscles? And the answer for about 90% of the population is no, hard no. So most people are breathing using auxiliary muscles as their dominant breathing muscles, and they're not using their diaphragm optimally. So we've switched it, which is kind of crazy. So auxiliary muscles, which should be secondary, are now primary. And once you can see that in yourself or someone else, as I said, it's a functional test. So you start understanding, oh, well, it shouldn't be up here. It should be in the middle of the body. And then you look at, okay, well, it's in the middle of the body. Well, how good is that breath? What is the range of motion? And looking at thoracic excursion is something that has been done historically for a very long time. And it's still used as a measure of good breathing, is how much can you expand the middle of your body and narrow the middle of the body. But given modern times, and now knowing that we've switched these muscles, is that we have to actually bring those two things together: location of movement and range of movement. And that's how you get the breathing IQ. So it lets you know how good is your breath and what muscles are you using.
So let's talk about, so you talk again about sort of horizontal versus vertical breathing, or using the wrong muscles, right? Which if I'm going to put that in layman's terms, is I'm breathing in my upper chest instead of in my diaphragm. I'm using like my shoulders and my neck and my traps and things like that to basically pull my chest up instead of expanding my diaphragm, right? And I can't remember who I talked to. Oh, I had on my own, like this is a while ago, I had a personal podcast where I took this guy, Andy Sabatier, who kind of is like a, breathing dude that kind of came up with his own stuff too. But I think it was him. He was talking about, like, think of your diaphragm like almost like a blacksmith bellows, where it's like, it's sort of like pulling out and then pushing in, right? Which I thought was such a great analogy.
Yes.
But why is that bad? Like, how is your breathing different in terms of the physiological effect when we breathe that way, right? When we breathe upper chest versus lower chest, I guess, or abdomen. What's wrong with it?
Yeah. Okay. So there's multiple things that make it less than optimal. And it's not wrong, because what I'm trying to do is give you a breath that has a lot of choices for how you're going to breathe, right? So a vertical breath gives you very little choices, both as far as your arousal and where you're breathing from. We'll get into that. And if you breathe diaphragmatically, it's a bigger breath by definition because of the shape of your lungs. So it's a more efficient breath. So say, again, when I started teaching, I thought it was going to be my yoga community calling me, and it ended up being jujitsu and DEA and DOD. So, which was fine with me. But my dad was in the military, and I grew up doing martial arts, so I was perfectly fine with that. So efficiency is important. So are you taking, is this one breath, how many breaths on the top of your body would you have to take to replace that bottom breath? And it's about 4 to 6. So again, I'm looking.
Really?
Yeah.
In terms of like the oxygen transfer or the gas exchange?
Exactly.
4 to 6 breaths up here versus one.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So think about, you're a fighter, you're in, whether it's a ring or an octagon, you're in your corner and you have a few seconds. How are you going to breathe if you only have a few seconds? What's most fascinating for me is something a lot of people don't know, which is the diaphragm does a lot of things. It's a massively important muscle that we just actually haven't thought about very much, because it's in the middle of the body, and in our minds, all the muscles are on the outside, right? So it's in the inside, and not a lot of people understand like what it looks like. And I usually describe it as a Frisbee-sized flank steak. Okay. And that's like, okay, I get that. Way in the middle of your body. And not only is it responsible for your breathing, it's responsible for optimal digestion, your back health being, sorry about that. It's responsible for your digestion. It's responsible for your back health. It actually changes your center of gravity. It is one of the most important factors in your arousal and vagus nerve stimulation.
I was going to say your vagus nerve runs right
exactly.
through there too. Yep.
So this muscle is really, it's responsible for a lot. Even, I mean, I just found a study that was fantastic that showed that optimal breathing helps cerebral spinal fluid flush. But it has to be diaphragmatic. So once you take a human being and you make them vertical dominant, there's a whole lot of things that start falling apart, including, for instance, balance. Is that there's a study that shows vertical breathers have more knee and ankle injuries. So things start falling apart because you're not using your diaphragm to breathe. Sorry, that was super long-winded, but yeah.
No, that's great. I had no idea that it was that inefficient.
Yeah.
Like the 4 to 6 breath, that's crazy.
Yeah.
How did we get here then? Why? Obviously, this is, I mean, I love breathing because for a lot of reasons, it's sort of, to me, it's like it's the pathway to the nervous system, and your nervous system is what connects your mind and body, right? That is the highway that you know, connects the information between those two things. And breathing is so interesting because it's the one thing we do automatically that we can influence directly, right? So it's like you have all these autonomic functions like digestion and your heart beating and all, whatever else that happen automatically that you can't really directly influence, but you can indirectly influence them with your breathing. And right. And so it's like this weird thing that lives on both sides of the fence. And can affect, depending on what you do with it, it can affect both branches of your autonomic nervous system. It can affect your sympathetic branch or your parasympathetic branch, right? Which is what's so cool about it. So given the fact that it's a natural thing that you do automatically, that we should do correctly, and we start off that way anyways. You talk about babies and animals and everything. You watch them, they breathe perfectly fine. Yeah. How do we screw it up over time? Is it mechanics? Is it a physiological thing where it's because we're like this all day? I'm sitting at a desk and therefore I'm compressing my diaphragm or whatever. Is it a psychological thing where we think about things and therefore we get like tense and that, or is it both those things, or is it something else?
All of them. So to answer that, we have to look at it sort of from a human evolution standpoint. And also a psychological standpoint, because we can manipulate the breath, we can mess it up, right? We can change it. So it does come back to mechanics, but you always have to add the psychology as well. So let's look at human evolution first, is that primitive man had a bigger diaphragm, a stronger diaphragm, bigger lungs, and was a much better breather than modern man. Absolutely. So was much more of a back breather because of the posture of being squatting and closer to the ground. So one of the first things that happened that changed breathing, what do you think? When you think of primitive man?
I'm sorry, go ahead. What'd you say?
Think of primitive man. What might have been one of the first things that changed the breathing? You have primitive man is down closer to the floor, more in a squat more of the day than not. And then first big change that happened.
That's a great question. I'm trying to think what would change primitively along our evolution that would make breathing different. I don't know.
It's tough. Stood up and became bipedal, right? It was stood up. And,
okay. Yeah. That far back. Got it.
Back. Yeah, we're going far back, right?
Okay. I was much further along in the timeline.
No. Okay. I need you to go way back. So stood up.
Got it. Okay.
Right. So think about if I know this is not your style. I know this is not your style, but when you see someone and they're like standing on a Bosu ball and they're holding things at the same time and doing something really dangerous and pretty stupid, but attention grabbing at the gym, is that when you get on something that's unstable, you automatically start breathing in a more narrow way. You start breathing less, and it's because of balance. So you're not going to be in a place where you have to balance and be taking big breaths. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So once you stand up, your diaphragm now becomes more of a muscle that helps balance, and now it has to do both balance and breathing, right?
Okay.
And that has two functions. So there's a big change there, because before all you had to do, I mean, it was just doing what it had to do, and you were down closer to the ground and you were accessing your lungs in the back, which is where most of our lungs are. So next change, and I won't put you on the hot seat for that. Next change, big change, is that we went from grunting to sentences.
Talking, right? Sure.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, millions of years or thousands of years.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Is that the innervation from the diaphragm to the intercostals got more dense. And for us, breathing took a second place because communication became more important than the breath. Not consciously, unconsciously. And if you think about what we do nowadays, we never think about our breathing. What's most important is that we finish our sentence and then we continue talking. And there is actually a breathing dysfunction that I coined, which has to do with talking too much. So if I have someone to come and see me,
this is a great way. I'm going to use this the next time I want somebody to shut up and just be like, hey, you have breathing dysfunction. I'm not going to tell them to talk too much.
You are talking way too much, and you are changing the breath with your communication being more important than an optimal inhale and exhale.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. And then we're going to fast forward through, change in agriculture and food and our mouths, and the light bulb comes in, which means we don't have to sleep and we can stay reading and thinking more. So posture changes. And if you kind of fast forward to the last 50 years, now we have technology. So technology just pushed us over the edge. Part of it is posture. Because posture affects your breathing up to 30%. Part of it is screen size, because your breath gets smaller when you have a screen in front of you, be that a phone, a computer, or a car. And the being seated, and I say this, we sit about 13 hours a day. We sit in cars, we sit at work, and we're really, really still, which is horrible for your body and horrible for your breath. Back to the computer is that when you are looking at your computer, it's what I call a modern predatory state. So if you look at an animal in the wild that's stalking prey, it's not breathing a lot because it's trying not to make a lot of movement, and it's focused. This is me focusing, right? And
my kids make fun of me because I pantomime things when I'm talking about them, and I didn't realize it. And now I focus on the fact that I'm pantomiming that. So you're in good company. Don't worry about it.
So there you are at your computer, and you're very much in this modern predatory state. But the difference is that in nature, it's a few minutes, and then you take a break, you yawn, you shake, whatever you do, take a nap, come back to it. And in our lives, we're in this state all day long. And it may be that you're just scrolling, or it may be that you have a deadline. And that's where the whole email apnea comes in, is that people holding their breath, being above water during the day, is something I see all the time. And that will mess up your biochemistry and your brain and your organs and everything getting oxygen.
So let's talk about that a little bit, but just to pause on that, this is something that I picked up on myself, and I realized, so I read James Nestor's book it's probably been 5 years ago at this point. And there's a lot of great stuff in that I didn't realize at all. the good news for me was I'm not a mouth breather. I figured out real fast. I'm like, no, I breathe through my nose. I don't have sleep apnea. I've done a sleep study, all of that. My wife is the opposite. She tapes her mouth when she goes to bed now and everything, because she's a complete mouth breather. So I was like, okay, cool. I don't have that issue. But to your point, I did figure out that I did the exact thing you're talking about. And I've never heard anybody call it a predatory response, but that I'm going to do the thing now with my hands too, a predatory response. But that makes complete sense. And it's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. I started to notice that I would hold my breath when I'm working. I'm doing emails or whatever. And I'm like, I'm holding my breath. Why am I holding my breath?
Yeah.
So that was kind of an eye opener. So talk about then the sort of, without getting too in depth, but the downstream effects of this, like when we start doing this, when we start breathing, to your point, not wrong, but like less than optimally, what can be the physiological effects of that? But then what can be the mental effects of it too? As much as we want to separate those things into distinct disciplines or distinct entities, they're not. I get it. Of course they're not. But what are those kind of like, what are the biggies, of where people it's dysfunctional for them?
So one of the biggies, and your general population might not think this is such a big deal, but your heart rate. And you had Dr. Lagos on, who's brilliant.
Yes.
And I love her.
She was great. Yeah.
And she explains heart rate variability with such clarity and such beauty. And I really appreciated you interviewing her. But the way to control your heart rate variability is through your breathing, and specifically a diaphragmatic breath. So you're going to notice this now, is that when most people talk about breathing, they'll talk about a pattern, or they'll talk about the exhale, or they'll talk about the nose, and they'll either assume or they'll gloss over the fact that you may or may not be using your diaphragm. So if you are trying to lower your heart rate or change your HRV, you should make sure that you're breathing diaphragmatically, because that's going to make the change happen faster and stay longer. Right. And it's because it's connected to your arousal and it's connected to your heart rate. So in working with a combat or tactical community, is that it may be a change of 5 heartbeats, but if it keeps you out of the black, right? And it keeps you in more of a flow state, even if you are very alert, is that those 5 or 10 heartbeats can make a huge difference. So a lot of it depends on who I'm talking to. What are we using this for? And that's where I started going down this big rabbit hole, really long rabbit hole of the breath is important for different things. So are you an endurance athlete? And that's everyone from a pitcher to a runner. Are you a precision athlete? So, or just in precision sports where you want to make sure that you're bringing your heart rate down to get that natural respiratory pause to be able to be more consistent and more precise. Are you using the breath as a recovery and a resilience tool? Which, again, fascinating stuff there. Or are you lifting? And again, when you're in the gym, that's a mechanical breath. When you're out of the gym, it's an anatomical breath. So breathing at the gym is completely different than breathing out, walking around. So are you using the breath well in the gym? And when you look at what's going on in the gym, and I always look at, I talk about the difference between how powerlifters breathe and how bodybuilders breathe. They have very, very different problems with their breath. But at the end of the day, in the gym, and we can talk about that because it's pretty interesting. I'm sure you could figure it out.
Yeah.
In the gym, your main goal is to protect your spine, not get injured, right? That's it, is that you're using the breath to make sure that your spine and your breath is holding things together well, that your movement, whatever you're doing, has what's called locomotive pairing so that it has integrity and you don't get hurt.
On the X is brought to you by Mechanics Wear. Mechanics wear gloves are kind of the go-to glove, I think, for most people out there, whether it's working around the house or on the job or some kind of tactical setting. That's certainly been the case for me throughout my life. And they've made a whole bunch of improvements to the gloves that they have out there. So they've got the kind of original series here with the Velcro backing, Velcro close that most people can use in sort of everyday settings, very ubiquitous for various things that you might want to do. Then they've got these fast fit ones, which you essentially just slide on. There's a little loop there around the wrist where you can pull them on. And then they've got the Impact series, which has a reinforced backing to protect your knuckles. And then they've got this lock ring reinforcement around the thumb now, where there's a lot of wear and tear. There's a whole bunch of other improvements to these. And if you go to their website, they literally have a 5 to 7 minute video about each one of these sets of gloves and all the improvements they've made, from the material, reducing the seams, making them more reinforced, making them more moisture wicking. It's clear that they put a lot of care and attention into their gloves. And if you listen to the guy talk on the website, they really love gloves. And I think that that comes out in everything they do. When I'm going out to a hardware store and I'm looking for some gloves, I almost look at everything else as just kind of a cheap knockoff. So definitely my go-to glove, highly recommended. Mechanics Wear gloves, they're available at most retailers on mechanicswear.com and GSA Advantage, and they're proud to offer an exclusive 15% off discount through the ID.me program to military veterans and first responders. So check them out. So those things are, I would say, kind of sports specific, maybe job specific. And there's tons of scenarios like that where people want to do that. I mean, I think a lot of the Wim Hof stuff is kind of trendy and hacky, so to speak, of like, okay, I'm going to, for cold water immersion or something like that. And it's absolutely effective at that. Like, I mean, I've done some of that. But it's also, again, those are like very specific scenarios. And I think for most people that are just, they're sort of like, you know, casual gym goers and they work at a desk all day. It's like, hey, I just want to be, I'm doing all these things so that the rest of my life is more efficient and effective and I'm more relaxed and I'm not as anxious and those types of things, right? So even for someone like me who are we're CrossFitters, where a lot of times we're doing CrossFit so we get better at CrossFit, the older I get, the more it's like, no, it's really just about longevity, feeling better, looking better, being healthier. And then the same thing for me, at least, applies with meditation and with breath work. I'm not doing any of it like I did breath work this morning. Like I try to do it every morning and every evening, but I don't do it so that I get better at breath work or like even lifting or anything like that. And I don't meditate so I become a master meditator. It's so the rest of the time is optimal, right? So to that point, I guess, where should people start? Right? Like you even have this like 14-day program in your book, Breathe. Like where would people start for just kind of that? Like, hey, I just want it to have like an impact to make me feel better.
So again, I'm always going to go back to first check your mechanics. So check your breathing IQ, thebreathingiq.com. Go check it. What's nice about it is that, you know, right now when you go get a test from a doctor, you don't really get a lot of, I don't know about you, but I don't get a lot of feedback about what did this measure and how do I change it? So I just went and got, routine labs done. And I talked to the doc and he said, oh, you're in great shape as compared to your peers. You're within normal limits. I'm like, you're going to compare me? I don't want to be compared to my peers.
Right. Yeah,
my
me
peers
too.
are in terrible shape. So you don't get feedback about what we measured and how can I make it better? Because we are aging. And again, you know this, is that your breath starts to decline at age 29. And that's brutal, because we want to live to be 80, 90, 100. So if our breathing starts to decline at age 29, we got to be doing something about it. What's interesting, and a lot of people don't know this, is that one of the main reasons that your breathing starts to decline is rib cage rigidity. You have complete control over that. So it's fascinating to me because we're scurrying around looking for all these biohacks and things that we can do with longevity. And your lung capacity and your lung velocity are two massively important indicators for that. And your rib cage being rigid, it becoming, I say, don't let your thoracic cavity become a rib cage. But when it gets tight, and I think about, that kind of like that Popeye, stiff.
Yes, the barrel chest kind of, yeah.
Yeah, barrel chest. I look at someone with a barrel chest and I'm like, oh my God, that person cannot exhale, which means they can't inhale, which means that their breathing rate is faster, which means they are definitely on blood pressure, at least blood pressure medication, and for sure have acid reflux. So when you talk about your average person, is that your average person is not spending time in rest and digest.
Yes. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
100%. Yep.
And what's interesting is your average person, and again, I mean, you're just average, you're human, is that they're complaining about digestive disorders, constipation, and inability to calm down, inability to sleep. Well, if you're always breathing in fight and flight, then your body's never being told it's safe enough for you to poop and go to sleep because you're in fight and flight. Right. And those aren't things that happen, when you're at war. So I think if you're looking at it in a general way is what things do I have in my body that are affected by the breath? And for instance, I just mentioned a few: acid reflux, irritable bowel, constipation, back pain, and sleep disorders.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah.
So what do people adopt then, right? Like in terms of your 14-day program, or if it's like, hey, okay, what do I do? How do I adopt like some practices here? What are they? Because, like I could list off a whole bunch.
Yeah.
You already mentioned Leah Lagos, resonance breathing, coherent breathing. You did the tactical breathing, box breathing. Yeah. There's like what is that one? Anyway, there's a whole bunch of ways to approach this.
Yeah.
Right. So what gets you the most bang for your buck, and where should people start?
Most bang for your buck is make sure that your form is correct, because the ripple effect from that is fascinating. And sorry to cut you off there, but is there like I get what you're saying. It's like, just make sure you're sort of like I'm sitting here normally working, right? I don't have to stop and do breath work, so to speak. I just have to make sure the mechanics are right. Is there kind of like a systematic way to do that? Like a check I can do on myself? Is it just like put my hand on my belly and like make sure I'm pushing that out? No, I want you to have numbers. So I want you to go to the breathing IQ.
Oh, okay. Okay. Got it.
Go to the breathing IQ. You diagnose yourself. Am I vertical? Am I horizontal? Am I hybrid? That's the first question. And then second question is you measure yourself along the bottom of your bottom rib. Inhale, exhale, you put in those two numbers, you get your grade. And as you do that, you realize, and that's why it's a functional test, is that you realize, oh, I should be horizontal. And this test wants me to be horizontal. A better grade is having the breath in the middle of the body, like every animal on the planet. And a better grade is a wider inhale and a narrower exhale. So it gives you the answer. And that's the beauty of this test. It doesn't make you go buy a gadget necessarily or take a course or be confused or whatever. It tells you the answer in your taking the test. And the answer is that your breath needs to be in the middle of your body, and your inhale needs to be expansive and your exhale needs to be narrow. Most of us have emotional corsets, muscular corsets.
That's a great expression. I have not heard that. Emotional corset. I love it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And again, this is that it starts at age 5.5. It starts at age 5.5. So I don't usually talk about infants because they don't really have a choice. I talk about toddlers and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. Because if you look at a 4-year-old, they're like, yeah, here's my belly, whatever.
Oh, totally.
You look at a 7-year-old and they're posturing. They are superheroes. They are their parents. They are getting tested. They're trying to be social and liked. And all these things start us to brace the middle of our body. And that's what's supposed to be moving.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go do this then, is the IQ.
Yeah.
So once you get that though, then what? Like, if I'm going to improve now,
then you start training yourself. And again, the book goes into detail, and The information's out there. It's not, it's not a secret. Is
Yeah,
that,
I know.
is that you work on it like you would anything else in physical therapy or in sport, is that you bring your breath down to the middle of your body. And one of the ways you do that is that you change the cue your body's giving yourself from this to your hips moving. Okay. So in general, we learn over doing thousands of reps since we're 5 that this is a deep breath. So when you see people, commercials or anything of that sort, deep breath is this big inhale like this, right? And that is not a deep breath, and it's not a good breath. It's not a good breath for your body or your brain or anything. Now, if you're if you're stacked, like in jiu-jitsu, and you can only take a vertical breath, you're going to start to panic slightly because you can't move your shoulders and you can't find that pocket of air that you need. So bringing the breath to the middle of the body gives you more choices as far as which way you want to breathe. The concept of that came from not only jiu-jitsu, but working with firefighters, is that firefighters spend a lot of time on the ground in small spaces, holding a lot of weight, and you have to be able to have choices of how to breathe from your side, your back, just being able to get a pocket of air to keep you going a couple more seconds. So if we go back to what you're doing is that you bring the breath down, and we need physical cues. So I want you to take your hands and I want you to put them at the bottom of your ribs. Okay? Yeah, right there. So densest part of your lungs is right there. Move them to the side a little bit. Right there. Now take your hands and put them at your back, 4 inches above your waistband. So go ahead. Put your hands in the back.
I'm not very flexible, so I don't even know if I can touch there, but okay, I'm doing my best.
Flatten your hands. Best part of your lungs, all the way down there. So you first have to start teaching yourself. And I teach with a lot of physical.
I am not flexible.
We'll work on that. We'll see how your breathing IQ comes out. So your lungs are in the middle that way, then this up here isn't very efficient. So your rate of breathing goes up automatically. And we know if you're breathing fast and shallow, is that's putting your heart rate goes up, and it's putting you in a state of arousal that you may not want to be at. You may want to be calmer. So if you put your fingers up by your collarbones up here and go ahead and you can do, right there, okay, is if you go straight in, you don't have a lot of lung right there. So if you're breathing like this, and you said it before, if you're picking up your rib cage with your traps, incredibly inefficient. Besides that uses more energy than it makes. And energy and breathing is a whole nother topic that's really interesting, is that how much energy are you making and how much is it taking up? And that's why with endurance, sort of the more modern definition of endurance is not just cardiovascular, it's respiratory muscle training. You have to add those two things to have optimal endurance.
I'm going to be, sorry, keep going.
Sorry,
no, I wanted to throw, there's a little bit of a delay here. You go, and then
all right, so you're going to move the breath from your shoulders to your hips because you're wanting the middle of your body to expand. And you want to remind yourself, every animal on the planet breathes expanding in the middle and then narrowing on the exhale. And usually this is when people say, well, what about animals that, are upright, like kangaroos? No, kangaroos also expand in the middle and narrow in the middle. So what you want to do to start to retrain yourself to breathe the way you were designed is you want to move your hips. So on the inhale, you do selfie butt, anterior pelvic tilt, let your belly go. And on the exhale, you squeeze and round your back. So these are all movements just the way you would go to physical therapy to help yourself relearn a movement, where you inhale, rock forwards, and exhale, rock back and squeeze. Now, rock back.
The rock and roll thing, right? You call it rock and roll.
The rock and roll. And the point of the exercises is that you used to breathe this way, right? And the only reason God put your diaphragm in your body where it is to be able to expand on the inhale and narrow on the exhale. So we're trying to get you back to the way you were designed, the way you used to breathe when you were 5. So I'm not teaching you something new. I'm teaching you something that your body has already done, and you have to remind it.
Right. Yeah. It's like those people in the abyss that drink, that like do liquid, right, oxygen or whatever. It's like, hey, you knew how to do this in the womb. Like we're just reintroducing it into your life again. So the thing I wanted to bring up, people are going to get sick of me bringing this up. I think I've done it in like 3 sequential podcasts here, but have you ever done any block therapy?
Block
no. Therapy. Yeah.
No.
I think you would really like it. So it's, I've got to look her name up. I think it's Deanna. Anyway, it's this woman. She does this therapy. It's with a wooden block. It looks like a yoga block with the edges beveled. And the whole idea, it's a myofascial release thing where you're just lying on top of this thing in various ways to break up fascia, to get oxygen circulating, to release toxins, all this kind of stuff. But it always starts with, every single session starts with breathing, and you put it in the center of, basically in your belly button, and you lie on top of this thing, and you'll start off where it'll almost hurt and you can barely lie on top of it. But after about 3 minutes, you will be all the way on the floor, and this thing will have, and what it's doing is it's like opening that up. It's pushing on your vagus nerve to help stimulate that. But then you'll move it up into your diaphragm, and you'll do the same thing there. And it's really, you have to be very conscious about pushing into the block with your diaphragm and then letting it sink in. And then you'll do it like on your ribs and everything. So my point with this is, it would be very complimentary to, I love it because I think it really parasympathetically kind of activates me or deactivates me, whichever way you want to think about that. But it also, and it's got all those other benefits as well. But I think it would be very complimentary to your work because it helps kind of bring conscious awareness to your diaphragm and how that works. You can actually feel it moving, which I think can be hard for people.
Yeah.
And then all the stuff on the rib cages helps kind of break things up there, like adhesions and whatnot, and would help people get their ribs expanding too. So anyway, I just think it would be something you would really like. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's really cool stuff. Again, people are sick of me talking about it because it's come up in like three podcasts.
No, it's, what you bring up is really important, is that we don't have a lot of awareness of the middle of our body. We really, and even more so again, in modern times, is that I'm finding folks are really numb. And when they look for information, they're looking outside of themselves rather than inside of themselves. So when I work with people and we talk about, inner game and then their mental state and intuition and things like that, is that you have to be able to turn your attention inward and feel the inside, and think about and feel the inside of your body and understand it at the very least.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like the other muscle that I was talking to Taya Kyle about is the psoas. And I just feel like,
I knew you were going to say that.
I feel like people spend so much time, if you stretch at all, it's like your hamstrings and your quads and things like that. And if it were me, the I guess 3 muscles, because your psoas is on both sides of you, but that I would spend the most time kind of activating and releasing, it would be your diaphragm and your 2 psoas muscles. It would be that.
So here's where I'm going to challenge you, is that are you releasing your diaphragm? Like, how's it doing? Where are you on a scale of like diaphragm?
Great question. Yeah, great question.
And you're going to,
I don't know.
Out
yeah.
when you take the breathing IQ.
I've got to take your test.
Yeah.
So getting back to the exercise stuff. But are there specific exercises that you have people adopt to, one of those types of breathing for various scenarios, like 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day or whatever? Are there things like that you prescribe for people?
There's something called the Big 5. There's something called the Big 5, and they are 5 exercises that help you expand your rib cage and lower the breath down to the middle of the body where it should be, and become more of a diaphragmatic breather. And the Big 5 are active exercises that are paired with the breath.
Okay.
They're important for two reasons, not just for your awareness, but also to get those muscles moving. You've got 10 pounds of breathing muscle, and they're probably not in shape, because when you do cardio, it's your heart. So working out your breathing muscles and becoming aware of them and paying attention to them is really important. So the big five, and rock and roll is one of them. Again, all you're trying to do is let me stretch my rib cage, because your obliques, and you know, CrossFitters have very tight obliques, is that your obliques are pretty much holding you closed if you're not able to have flexibility to turn them on and off. So you're going to want to check your body and see, do I have the expansion and am I able to narrow? Do I have that movement? So those 5 exercises are good. If there's other ones that you like, I'm never necessarily push my agenda. What I want is for people to have the knowledge, and then they can do something about it. And it can be the things I prescribe or not. But are you taking a deep breath? Are you really taking a deep breath? I had a study just actually come out and get published a few days ago, and I'll send it to you. And it's specifically about the breathing IQ. We looked at about 384 people to see how common breathing dysfunction was, and found the numbers to be really high. You don't have a lot of places to go to get help fixing your breathing mechanics that give you a baseline and give you education so that you can work on it on your own.
Totally. And that I was just going to say that, like, what's so great about this stuff is there's no disease here. There's no like diagnosis or anything like that. It's not like some treatment protocol. It is like, you can fix all this on your own. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So empowering.
And I'm just big on that. I'm big on like the empowerment aspect of these types of things, where it's like, hey, take some responsibility and fix it.
And it's the very most important thing you can do. The reason I got interested in the things it can fix wasn't primary for me. What happened is that I was teaching 15 years ago, my patients how to breathe, and they would come back and say, you know what? I have had acid reflux my whole life. And I thought it was part of my family, this genetics, right? And I've been doing these breathing exercises, and my acid reflux is better, and I'm starting to titrate down on my medication. And I had to say, I have no idea why that is, because I'm a psychologist who's learning breath work, but let me figure it out. And I found, as I started studying sports science and more medical literature on breathing, how important the diaphragm is for your digestion. Same thing with back health. So often I have folks come in and say, I have been to all the best doctors for this, and it's through learning this right now, breathing, that I am actually starting to feel better. And it's wild.
That's a great story. Do you have others like that? Or do you have like a couple stories that you tout as like your biggest victories, where it's like, look at this transformation that brought about?
I mean, I can tell you a little bit about what I'm doing now at MD Anderson. I hope I'm, not breaching some rule. There's lots of rules there. So I'm fascinated at how breathing can help medical conditions. I mean, not only do I love breathing in sport for performance, but also in medical conditions. So I came across statistics that said that 20% of women who went through left-sided breast cancer radiation ended up having serious cardiac problems later on. 20%. So you live through cancer and now you have serious cardiac problems. 20% is a really big number. So I started thinking, why is this happening? We should be able to move the heart away from the path of radiation. And we're not talking about, this much. We're talking about that much, right? So I looked to see, how are they being cued to breathe when they're getting radiation? And they were told, take a deep breath. Now, what we're seeing is that take a deep breath is
yes.
Right?
Sure.
Now, if you're doing this, What is your diaphragm doing?
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing. And the point of the deep breath is that if you think about this as your diaphragm, your heart is tethered to your diaphragm. It's tethered. Fascia and all kinds of things. So if you actually breathe diaphragmatically, this is what happens.
Yeah.
And that's a little mind-blowing. So if you were able
Yeah.
to teach people to breathe diaphragmatically, truly diaphragmatically, you would be pulling the heart away from the path of radiation. So that's what I'm looking into right now.
That's interesting. It's funny. I'd never really focused on the fact that we tell people a lot of meditative practices will always start off with take a few deep breaths, but we never tell people how to do it. We just kind of assume that the way they're doing it is effective, and it's not. And that's a really good point of, okay, like let's insert some mechanics into that because it matters how you do that.
And that's something that I've heard over and over. I had David Blaine's pulmonologist came to see me, and I thought I was getting punked because I was like, this guy's brilliant, right? Why is he seeing me? And he said, I went through the whole protocol with him and I wasn't getting punked. And he said, you teach the how. No one teaches the how. And and there we go.
That's funny you bring up David Blaine. I literally was just watching his show the other night. Like I stumbled on his Do Not Attempt show. That guy is crazy. Like he's just a complete psycho. That dude.
Yeah. Try Jackass. That was I don't know how I ended up going to a live show of his Steve, forget his last name. Yeah.
Steve-O, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things not to do. Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah. Things not to do. That's exactly right. So I guess like last couple things here. You have two books. You have one, Breathe, one's Breathing for Warriors. Is there a fundamental difference there in terms of like, I'm a warrior, I'm not a warrior kind of thing, like what they should be doing? Or is it just come down to sort of, okay, these are around exercises or specific types of professions, so to speak?
Let's see. Well, Warriors, I loved writing that book. I interviewed so many people and still missed people that if I do a, second version I'd put in, but I realized I'm not a Valsalva expert, but I have a lot of resources. I have a lot of strength and conditioning coaches and athletes that I can talk to about how they cue Valsalva. So what I did, and I would never do this again, and I don't recommend it, is that I went to the best of every sport and interviewed and read everyone. It nearly killed me, but it's a beautiful book and everyone can use it. So even if your exercise is that you jog on the weekends or you walk around the block, that's endurance, and there's a section on endurance. You're a golfer, there's a section on precision. You need to recover, there's a section on recovery and resilience. So it's good for sports specific, but you don't have to be, hardcore warrior to read the book. You can just love your golf game, love walking, wanting to deal with how to use the breath kind of in a more therapeutic inner game way. They're both useful. Go to the library and take them both out. You don't have to buy them. And I donate a lot of books to libraries because libraries are important. Yeah. So my publisher always gets mad because I'm like, just go to the library. They're like, no, tell people to buy the book. I don't buy it, share it.
Giving away books is a good, you'll reap the benefits, I think, in return on that. So, what's your practice look like now then? What's your kind of like interaction on this front? Do you work with specific groups, individuals, both, coaching? What's it look like?
So right now I'm chin deep with cancer patients. Doing this study. And then the next study, I'm going to Olympia, Washington to work with correction officers. So a lot of folks don't know this, but as far as first responders, correction officers have the shortest lifespan of any first responder.
Yeah, I actually think I did know that. Yeah.
Did you?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm doing a study on resilience training with correction officers after this one. So a lot of studies.
Too. Like, do we know why? I mean, we're not, and I assume we're not talking about like, some inmate assaulted and killed somebody, something like that. We're talking about just sort of natural lifespan, whatever that's worth, or whatever, however we want to deem that term, or define that term. So do we know what that is? Is it stress? Is it, does it come down to like?
So first of all, you're in an environment that's chronically understaffed, underpaid, and undervalued. People do not understand how important correction officers are. They're keeping us safe. They're making sure when you transport an inmate, they don't get away and get away. So the combination of the being undervalued, underpaid, having lack of resources, it's that will wear on you. And when you're at work, it's constant threat. You have to be alert the whole entire time you're there.
Yep.
So
talk about constant fight or flight. That is like you are constantly sympathetic. Yeah. And
folks don't know about it. Unless you know the prison system, you don't understand the importance of correction officers. So you're not getting a pat on the back, which can help tremendously, is when people recognize they don't.
I would, speaking of sympathetic, you and I probably would agree on this. We could go down a rabbit hole. I'll avoid it. But speaking from my own kind of woo sensibilities here, I would think a piece of that too is just the energy of the people you're around all day long, right? So like the energy of that system is toxic, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, as humans,
okay, cool.
As humans, go ahead. As long as we are in, and I know you interviewed Sebastian Junger as well, who I adore, and we sit on we're both part of Leadership Under Fire, which is a great podcast, fantastic people. Shit, I forgot where I was going with that. Nick's
It's all right. No worries. Why don't we just wrap it up? Because we're about 15 minutes over, and I'm sure you got to get to other things. But look, I love this conversation. I love this stuff. And when we hang up here, like, just want to chat at you for about 5 minutes, just on some of the kind of personal things I do too. But thanks so much for your work, and I really appreciate the empirical approach you have with it too. I do think that that's very important, because sometimes these types of things, people can sort of dismiss it as woo or dismiss it as anecdotal or whatever, and digging in and actually saying, no, we can measure this and we have data behind this, I think is really important. So it's incredibly important work. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Keep up the great work.
My pleasure, Chris.
Thanks for listening to On the X, the official podcast of the Navy SEAL Foundation and an Ironclad original series sponsored by Mechanicswear. Learn more at NavySealFoundation.org or text On the X to 60104. See you next time.